Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co hostess, Anna, and I'm here with Margaret. How's it going today, Margaret?
Hello, all you frightlings and grieflings, and welcome to another juicy, delicious, entertaining episode of Femme Fatalities. Today, Anna, what will we be discussing today?
Well, today, we've had a few of you listeners ask how two ghouls like us found each other. We're going to tell you. We were in the same grad program together for Thanatology, and one of our professors assigned us a paper to write, and it was very refreshing. Speaking of refreshments, Margaret's going to have some cocoa today, and I've been
Mhm.
sipping on Beetlejuice, but a little bit more on that later. We became fast friends. We were always posting about horror movies and different genres, and with the assignment our professor had given us, we were like, hey, media is a great tool to talk about different things. And if you haven't already guessed by now, Margaret's going to tell you what some of these films help us open up about.
Yeah, so this assignment brought us together as we really clicked. Film is a great way for us to talk about. Well, we met in a thanatology program, so all things death, dying, and grief related. And so you didn't catch Anna's hint there. For said film, I chose Coco, and Anna chose.
Beetlejuice!
Don't say it 3 times.
He's already here. He lives in my basement. Oh, that reminds me. Hey, rent's due. Excuse me. Sorry.
Yes, and so this assignment really was how films either support, this was for a developmental thanatology class, so focus on children. If you listen to us, you will know most of our films focus on how film help adults address grief or don't address grief. This assignment was about children. And so we're just gonna take it from there. Anything you'd like to add, Anna?
No, I think that's perfect. I like that we both kind of found characters in the films that we selected to really talk about, but also to kind of talk about the adults around these characters as well. It's very different too. My character was an adolescent, and your character.
Was a little boy. So if you haven't seen Coco, go watch it. Quick summary. It's a movie about Miguel. He loves music and he believes his great grandfather was a famous musician. And his family hates music because great grandpa left great grandma. And she's like, that's it. We're done with music. I hate it. No music. And so Miguel ends up going to the world of souls, where he does meet his great grandfather and learns the story that his great grandpa wasn't this famous musician. He was his partner and he was murdered, and how Miguel is bringing back the memory because for this movie, for Dios de los Muertos, in order for your soul to live on, for you to participate in the holiday, for you to stay in Soul Land, people have to remember you, often by a photo, by stories. So this movie really was, and if you listened to some of our other ones, we talk about this. How do we keep our deceased loved ones alive? Through stories. And it's so beautiful. And especially in Coco, through music. It was just so beautiful. I will share, my mom loved this movie before she passed on. My grandmother lived in Mexico City for my entire childhood. And so, talk about how Coco mirrors life. My mom is connecting with her mother while she's alive because Mexican culture was huge for my grandmother. And then, yeah, so that is Coco. Anna, Beetlejuice.
Well, so anyone who's seen it, you probably focus on the little haunting guy himself, but I found that there were a lot of other themes in the movie, and that's what I focused on when I had done my paper. If you haven't seen Beetlejuice, get out there, find it streaming somewhere. It's great entertainment. I love Tim Burton. It's just a wonderful film. And we do find out, and what I chose to primarily focus on during my research and support, is the bonds that two bereaved persons can create with one another. So for me, there's a couple, they own a home, they get into a tragic accident, they die, they come home, they don't realize that they're ghosts, and then these people from the big city move in. And of course, having spent a lot of time on my grandparents' farm as a kid, I was like, oh, I can identify with this, but only one person can actually see the ghost, and that is the teenage daughter, Lydia. And so she actually starts to bond with them, which we'll get into a little later. And eventually they want to get the living out of their house because they're just destroying everything. They're changing everything. It's become a bit of a nuisance. That's where Beetlejuice comes in. To me, he really represents the negative sides of grief more than anything else. And we get introduced to kind of the afterlife and what that looks like, and some inside jokes, and just a lot of different things. And then at the end, the living and the ghost figure out how to live in harmony and exist with one another and coexist. And my hellhound just came in, if you see her. Hi, baby. And just in terms of that coexisting and getting rid of Beetlejuice or grief, right? So you can continue your bonds. So I think it's great. I love the movie. It's a lot of great special effects. It's a lot of fun too. I started watching horror movies when I was like 4. So if you have a child like that, go for it any age. But if you have a child that's maybe not like horror focused, probably 8 or 9 would be a good starting age for the film. What about you, Margaret? What do you think for Coco? What age do you think is a good age for kids to start watching?
Probably 5 or 6. It's animated, it's fun, it's bright colored. And so we just have 2 movies that are focusing on the afterlife and helping to introduce children to death and the idea of what happens to us after we die. Coco misses a lot. Like, it really gives that positive, not like Beetlejuice, where it's like, oh, when you die, you just go to Soul Land and it's
Yeah.
good time and it's fun, and which makes sense because kids are not necessarily in a place for that. It would be nice if they had given a little bit more of the somberness, the sadness, the
Mhm.
emotion to it. So yeah, 2 movies about the afterlife. Interesting side note, Lydia in Beetlejuice is actually my mom's name. So just talk
I
about
did not
interesting
know
coincidence.
that.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Hmm.
Very cool.
Yes.
Oh, huh.
Yeah.
My goodness, you always take me by surprise, Margaret. Uh, that's so cool. Well, and I think too, like the movies are great because there are so many different experiences going on that, yes, like they're a great way to talk about and open death conversations, but there are specific experiences too, like um that are more adult focused as well, and that's very helpful. I mean, what do you think what's the theme that stood out the most to you in the movie Coco, and why? Like, how do you think it's beneficial that it stood out to you, and also how do you think it's beneficial for other people to take note of it?
That's a great question. Hope you know your question's coming back at you when I
Dun dun
answer.
dun.
Yes. So Coco really touches on, first of all, life loss. We start with I think it's like great great grandma, because his grandma, no, so great grandma. She hates music because of the life loss. Her husband, she feels abandoned her and her daughter, Coco. So that's where the movie's name comes from. Grandma's name is Coco. So to protect her daughter, she's like, no music. We're going to work hard. We're going to open the shoe factory. And so it really does start to touch on these life losses and how we respond to them, and how so often in life, if I lose somebody in a life loss, I might be like, I cannot stand that anymore. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, if I was dating a guy who I was so in love with and he loved rockabilly music, then I'm like, I cannot stand that anymore. And the ways we then adapt to it. So Coco does this wonderful job of doing that. And then how Miguel brings that back. Like he's pivotal. He starts singing the dad's song to Coco. And then she
Mhm.
starts to remember her dad. And so how do we come together? How do we heal from those life losses that the beginning of the movie touched on? Anna, same question about Beetlejuice.
So yeah, for me, I think that the standout theme um was two people connecting through their grief. One as an adult, one as an adolescent. In the beginning of the movie, when Adam and Barbara, who are the couple that eventually die and then haunt, they're realizing they're both on vacation, they have some time off together, and he says to her, we could work on a family again. So we know that she's either miscarried, she has fertility issues, or they've lost a child, or a combination. And then we find out later on when the living move into the house after their ghost that Lydia can see them, and her quote unquote mother is actually her stepmother. So we know that something happened to her mother, whether the parents were divorced, whether the mother has health issues, has other sorts of issues, whether she died tragically, we don't know, but we know she's out of the picture. So Barbara has this very nurturing quality and caring and loving quality that connects her and Lydia. Lydia is going through a lot of things. I mean, she's an adolescent, of course she is. But I think that the beauty of connecting to another person who is grieving in a way that's similar to how you are grieving, and we talked about this before, no one knows exactly how another person feels, but there's so much beauty in that, and that it can be so helpful. And just the idea of talking to someone and opening up is great for children to see, for adolescents, even adults. And also, our grief journeys continue on. I can tell you, one of my very close friends, a close new friend, um, has been going through their own journey, and we both have parallels in our individualized journeys, and it makes me very thankful to have them as a friend. Hopefully you feel the same way if you're listening, bud. um, but it's really when you bond with someone over something that intense and that personal, it creates such a friendship dynamic or such a relationship dynamic, depending on the characters involved. For me, it's a friendship dynamic. um but it can vary, but it's really great to know that you don't always have to look at things through rose colored lenses, that there's someone else, they don't have the same lens as you, but it's a similar prescription. And you can be there for each other, and that's very helpful. And the other thing is the whole I don't want to be dead theme. Right? Death is scary. Death is something we can't fully explain, we don't fully understand, because there aren't that many of us that have died and come back, and many people who have had NDEs or near death experiences don't really talk about it. Um, so it is scary. You don't know what's waiting for you on the other side. And if the potential of becoming a civil servant or getting an assigned haunting for 125 years isn't appealing to you, too bad. This is what it is. But I think just the idea that death is very scary, um, is is beneficial for children to see, and also for that to be acknowledged by the adults in the children's lives, and to say it is scary, but you can talk about it. And I think that that's a really great theme as well.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And so I'm going to move back to where you were first talking about Barbara, right? And
Hmm.
she's having grief. She can't have kids, or she is having problems conceiving, or maybe they put it off. We don't know. And we can guess that she's got this maternal instinct. and she's doing her own grief now that she's dead, that's not going to happen. And here comes Lydia. And Lydia really needs a mother figure. Her stepmom's not a great mother figure.
She's
And so
very eccentric.
yes, they come together and they're both getting the support. They need
Mhm.
Barbara's being able to nurture somebody. Lydia's getting that nurturing. Coco also, as Miguel's trying to figure out what's going on. He has these ancestors that have come to support him, to help ease him as he's starting to, if he doesn't get back to the living, he will become dead. He will have to stay in the soul world forever. And so he's getting support too from oftentimes people that we don't think are there to support us. We get these
Mhm.
supports. Anna might be able to touch on this. This can be a touchy subject for some people. I believe that my deceased loved ones are able to
Mhm.
support me now that I am here. Not now, they just do. And it's how open
Yeah.
to them am I to allow them to support. And both movies really touch on how do we get support from
Mhm.
those that have come before us. And I'll even break that down. If my ancestors did not survive, I would not be here
Right.
today. So they have already done so much to support me
Mhm.
so I can be here. Then how am I connecting with, again, I believe my deceased loved ones are supporting me. It's just, how do I open that up in both movies? Touch on how are we open
Yeah.
to supports that are there for us that we may not even be aware of, living or dead.
Oh, totally. And we always say there's no playbook or rule book for grief. There's no rule book for how you stay connected to your departed loved ones either. For some of us, we go to the cemetery or we pull out their ashes, we hang out with them. Some people talk to their departed. Some people believe that when you're dead, that's it, you're gone, and that's totally fine too. It's whatever your prerogative is. Like Margaret, I'm very spiritually connected and I have my own rituals and traditions. Um, that I follow and, stay connected. And that's great. I mean, and sometimes even the things that we're doing, if we're doing them in a way where we feel that that loved one would have encouraged us, that's a great way to stay connected as well. So there are so many different options to stay connected and continue those bonds if that's something you're interested in. And there are relationships where we don't want to continue those bonds when that person or animal is gone. That's it. Don't want to think about them. Don't want to do this. That's okay too. It's just you have to make sure that you have the proper support and communication tools to ensure that the end of that relationship does not hinder your ability to continue the relationships that you consider valuable that you currently have, as well as the potential ones that you would give value to if you were building.
Yes, I completely agree. Well said.
Well, thank you. So this is kind of random, but just in general, like, what do you think is the most comical scene? Like the funniest, like it's gonna make somebody laugh, like brace yourself for it in the entire movie that you chose in Coco.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know if I have an answer for that one. The funniest scene. I can't even think of one. I can think of the funny scenes in Beetlejuice. I think Coco is just very. And if our listeners disagree, please comment. Let us know
Yeah.
what you thought was so funny in Coco. I just felt Coco was so lighthearted, warm, just
Hmm.
felt like a hug, even though it was really sad.
Yeah.
I will add, and Anna and I touch on this often, when we watch certain movies, depending on where we are in our grief journey, impacts how we may experience
Hmm.
that film. So I touched on this was one of my mom's favorite films before she died. So I think coming into Coco, my own grief journey impacted that. This was a way that I was connecting to my mom, to my grandmother who lived in Mexico. So for me, it was more of like, oh, this family, which Coco is about. So, and I'm anybody who's watched it that is on a different grief journey, please share the funny parts because I know that they're
Mhm.
there. Maybe when he's running with his guitar because he really wants to play
That's the
music,
one I
and
thought of.
the adults are like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you can't play," and he's like, "I'm gonna play music no matter what."
Yeah.
That was a really funny
Mhm.
scene. Beetlejuice, oh my gosh, when he gets his head shrunk, iconic. I
Yeah.
love that scene. He's just,
It's great.
oh,
It really is. It's
yeah.
iconic. And like for me, my favorite, it's a little morbid, but the load of football players when they're like to Juno, "Hey coach, I don't think we made the crash." And she's just like, "How'd you guess?" I love it. I love the deadpan sarcasm. Um, I love her character in general, which I'm always curious. I need to research this. Because the kind of, I don't want to say the inside joke because I don't think that's the right terminology, but like the inside theme that keeps coming up is that, if you complete suicide in the living world, you're destined to be a civil servant in the afterlife. And I always assumed that Juno had throat cancer because when she smoked, the cigarette smoke would come out. Um, and also, I don't really think that's a bad thing. You know, maybe, for instance, if someone was in a situation where they felt like their living, walking existence didn't have any meaning, like maybe in the afterlife that gives them purpose and meaning. Um, but yeah, I just always assumed she had throat cancer. But
That's what
I,
I always assumed. And I really appreciate your twist on maybe not twist, like you said, but
mhm,
then how does somebody find meaning in death if they didn't
mhm,
have it in life? And we're talking about Coco, we're talking about Beetlejuice. This one's pretty lighthearted. So Anna and I will have a more heavy, deeper episode where we can discuss suicide because
mhm.
that feels like it just needs its own episode and it is something that impacts us. And so stay tuned because then we can explore that. Do they get meaning in death?
Totally.
I think
Yeah,
that's a beautiful way to look at it.
yeah. And there's a lot of, as Margaret said, we'll explore that more. There's a lot of history. There are a lot of more progressive ways of thinking. So stay tuned for that. If we go back to Coco and Beetlejuice, um, I think that both films are great. I mean, I agree totally with Margaret that Coco is just very endearing. Um, you cannot watch it and only feel one emotion, which is very enjoyable to the viewer. I feel like for that particular movie, at least for me, tell me how you feel. You're enveloped with like a big, warm, cuddly hug.
Mhm.
It's like when you come in from shoveling 3 feet of snow on a winter day, and you have this big mug, no pun intended, but of hot cocoa in front of you, and you hold it close to you, and the warmth just goes up your hands, up your arms, through your entire body. You take a sip, and you feel that warmth inside of your body too. And I think that a movie talking about ancestral worship and the dead and grief for different situations, it's very difficult to do that. And to me, it's incredibly enjoyable.
Yes, I think you said it so eloquently. It is this deep topic, and yet they're almost making it like you're sitting on somebody who you love, who you trust on their lap, and they're holding you as they're guiding you through this. So it's like the soft, like you're kind of just going along. You've had a bad day, to like, come here, I got you, let's work through this. Where other movies are, as you know, you listen to us, there are movies that it's like you're being beat up the entire
Mhm.
time. Beetlejuice, does not feel like the same hug. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
It almost feels like I'm here, I'm going to laugh, you're going to touch on some hard
Mhm.
topics, but in that way where we use comedy to
Yeah.
alleviate the hard topics. Oh, you're
Mhm.
grieving. At least it wasn't you, or whatever kind of way to be like,
Right.
we're just going to throw some humor at this because it's
Mhm.
really sensitive, and the humor is going to hopefully carry us as we say, "Oh yeah, that's there," and we'll
Mhm.
get to it in a comedic way.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's great in the way that Beetlejuice does it because how many of us deflect
Mhm,
what we're going through and our feelings by using humor? I mean, that's humor and sarcasm are my number one and number two defense mechanisms. Always have been, always probably will be. But I think it's a really wonderful way for the audience to connect because it's like, oh, okay, well, this is okay. Like it's fine. But it's also, we were talking about that warm feeling coming in from a cold, snowy day. This is actually like running through the carnival on kind of a windy day and you're shoving like all the nachos and corn dogs and fried cookies you can get into your mouth and then you decide to go on like the tilt-a-whirl and then you stumble off of the tilt-a-whirl and you stand there for a minute trying to get your bearings about you and then you just do it all again. So I think it's satisfying, a lot of fun, but also like a little jolting too, but not in a negative way. I also think that, the title of the movie is Beetlejuice. People think that sometimes it's all about that character, but it really isn't that much about him at all.
mhm,
Um, if we take a deeper look, and I mean, we find all sorts of grievers throughout the film. We've got, of course, Barbara and Lydia, who we've already talked about. We also have Lydia's dad, Mr. Deeds, right? Something happened in his big developer career in the city went bust, so they moved out so
mhm.
he can get some rest. Um, he's married to someone who is mourning her former life with her artsy friends always going and doing something. And then we also have kind of just these characters that pop up throughout the film who talk about, like, if you don't do this, you're going to end up this way, like the lost souls. And they're kind of, the dead of the dead, the ones that have been exorcised. And I think that really is a great way to compare, um, quote unquote, getting rid of your feelings versus addressing your feelings, right? So you kind of end up floating along, but maybe not in the best environment if you forget your feelings. Whereas if you work through them, the Book of the Dead, you figure out, how to navigate different thoughts and ideas and suggestions and supports that would help you, then you end up a little bit, I think, in a better position.
Yes. Ooh, and you bring up how Beetlejuice, we just assume it's about Beetlejuice, and he is. He's the
Hmm.
loudest. He's the one that's going to divert our attention from, as you touched on, these life
Hmm.
losses that almost, I'm going to argue, almost all the characters in Beetlejuice are experiencing all these life
Hmm.
losses, career, moving, changes, and Beetlejuice is a great distraction because he's
Hmm.
just going to put it out there. He doesn't care. And he's not even dealing with his loss as he's been banned. He has to go do this work because he's not playing nicely. And then Coco in the movie, you're like, wait, who's Coco? What's going
Yeah.
on? Because it focuses on all the other characters when the story really is about Coco
Right.
and her relationship with her dad and her mother, and how each of these movies named after main characters,
Hmm.
one, he's gonna pull our attention, he's
Yeah.
gonna pull us in. Coco almost was like, when you're watching, you're like, oh, it's grandma's Coco, and this is about how she, again in Coco fashion, softly influences her family, how her ripple effect is very different than Beetlejuice's tidal wave effect.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like Coco's got the butterfly effect. She's flapping her wings. We see how she impacts other. Beetlejuice is that like tidal wave. He's just
Yeah.
like knocking people
Crash.
out.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yes.
And something else that I noticed, like a tiny bit in Coco, but more so in Beetlejuice, was the concept of time. Like there's that particular scene where Barbara and Adam meet with Juno and they come back to their house and everything's totally different and it's been months and they don't even realize it. How similar in some ways is the grieving process, right? You're going to try to get through the day, you're doing what you have to do. And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, this character in my life left, died, whatever the case is, 3 months ago, and I haven't really done anything to address that yet."
Yes. I love that because that is so pertinent. Like you're saying, when we're grieving, we lose a sense of time. And for those of you that have been through the grieving process, how often do we find ourselves saying, I can't believe it's been a year? I can't believe it's been 10 years. It feels like it
Mhm.
happened yesterday. Because in our grieving process, there'll be times we're like, wow, it's been 5 years and we're feeling good. We're feeling okay. And then maybe at a 10-year death
Mhm.
anniversary or life changing anniversary, we're like, I feel like this just happened. All those
Oh, yeah.
emotions come back. And Beetlejuice really does kind of show us that there is
Mhm.
not this linear process that our grief, we can be like, oh yeah, it's in the past, and then something happens, we're like, oh, it's right here in my face again.
Yeah, and I always kind of call it timeline shock, just, something so just as an example, and I'm certain you probably have one too, and I would love for you to share it. Um, a few months after my grandma died, and any of you who are new, I helped take care of my grandmother. She lived to a very ripe old age. We were incredibly close. Cognitively, she was there until the end. And when she died, it substantially impacted me in my life. It still does to this day, and it's been a few years. But a few months after she died, we had a corporate buyout at the organization I worked for, and there were a lot of really great benefits that initially came with that. And I had gotten some really valuable, exciting information from the leadership team. And as soon as I left, my first thought was, oh my God, I can't wait to tell grandma. And then I was like, oh shit, I can't. And I think sometimes when you have that closeness with that person, like that person you identify as like your best friend, and you're always so excited to tell them any sort of news, and then that's like your knee jerk reaction, like, oh my God, this just happened. I can't wait to tell so and so. And then you realize they died. Um, and it's very unsettling. It can throw you back into another part of your grief journey. It can throw you into a new part. It does a lot of different things, but if anyone is going through that, or if you have experienced it, it is pretty normal. So, you're not going mad. You're not wild minded or anything of the like. It is very normal for that to happen. What about you, Margaret? Did you have any, oh shit, they're not here anymore type moments with anyone?
Yes, and thank you for sharing about your grandma and bringing this conversation and normalizing it for people. So, and we'll get this topic in a later podcast. So, I am an adult orphan, which means that both my parents have died in my adulthood. So, after my dad died, I was in my mid 30s. He was the person that I called. Anything went wrong with my car, any mechanical questions I had. And so with him, I can remember just being like, who do I call now? Oh my gosh, my car's making this funny sound. I had this question about my water heater. Oh, I can't call my dad. With my mom, I used to call her on my way home from the office. thankfully, kind of sort of COVID happened shortly after she died. So I actually had this buffer. That's why I think thankfully, because then I wasn't like getting in my car going to call my mom and being like, I can't call my mom.
Mhm.
So like what Anna was sharing, I had to retake a test for my state licensure. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Colorado. And I'd taken it years ago, and it state of Colorado said, no, you got to take it again because you took it so long ago. And I passed. And I was so excited. I got in my car. I was like, I have to call my mom. I passed. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I can't call my mom. And like Anna said, it's this shock because you, in that moment, you're in a place where your loved one is still here and you're got the momentum. And then it's almost like, it feels like somebody's just yanked you
Mhm.
back. They've just pulled you back as like you were stepping forward. And we can see that in Beetlejuice and Coco too, how people are moving towards something and then they're being pulled back. Adam and Barbara, they're being pulled back.
Yeah.
Miguel being pulled back the ways that we're like, oh, wait, I'm here. I'm in this reality. And for a moment, my soul was in some dual reality where I could call you and you could fix my car. I could call you and share my good news with you.
Definitely. And just there's a lot of dualism that happens during the grief process. And I, once again, I really appreciate you sharing as well. And hopefully, us sharing tidbits about our own journeys and lives helps anyone listening that might be questioning what you're going through to understand this is normal. It is okay.
Yes,
It is okay for you to feel this way. It's okay when these things happen. It is normal during the grief process. Someone who may not have gone through their own grief journey as of yet, or may not be able to relate to others in the way that is needed, may tell you otherwise. Don't listen to them. Like, don't listen to those jokers. They don't know. We're thanatologists, we're professionals, and we're telling you not only, are we thanatologists, but we both have had some journeys that inspired us to do this. And um, you're going to feel really strange and off kilter at certain moments. And that's okay. It's funny to say feeling strange is normal, but in this case, it is.
it is. And so normal. So, Anna, I'm curious, how did you respond in that moment when you knew your grandma wasn't there? I know for me, and Anna and I have talked about continuing bonds. This is an example of that. I talked
Mhm.
to my dad. I was like, I really wish you were here. I'm driving on the highway and I don't know. And I really want to call you because you would ease me. You would tell me this, you would tell me that. Funny enough, I had his boots in the trunk of my car, whole other story. So then I was like, oh my gosh, and I have your boots. And what would you be telling me? And the same thing with
Mhm.
my mom. I was like, I really wish you were here. I cried on that one. I was like, I really wanted to share this news and I miss hearing you. And in each of those, for me, my normal grief process was I could hear my dad. My dad being like, you know
Mhm.
what, Margaret, it's okay. Your car's making a funny noise. Kind of weird. You got my boots in the trunk of your car. We're not going to go there right now. I get it. And say with my mom, like, way to go. I knew you could do it. So I'm
Mhm.
interesting. I'm in my car both
Yeah.
times. Cars can be a safe place for us to process grief. I
Oh, it
had this
is.
conversation with each of my parents and it
Mhm.
comforted me.
That's awesome. I was in the car too, funny enough. It's amazing what happens in our cars.
Yes.
I actually, at first I cried like a baby, and anyone who knows me, I'm not I don't have a lot of frequent crier miles. I don't emote often in that way.
High
Um,
five, fellow not big a motor.
right. It's okay though. If you need to,
Yes.
go emote yourself. Like, it's
Woo.
good. It's healthy. When I do emote though, it's quite a festival. But it was funny because I was sitting there kind of like hyperventilating, crying, almost like a kid that you take like a cookie away from. And
The ugly cry,
oh,
which
it's
is
super ugly cry.
even for you non-criers, go have your ugly cries.
Yeah.
I have ugly cried showers, and again,
Hmm.
cars for
Oh
some
yeah.
reason are just wonderful
Hmm.
for
Oh.
the ugly cry. So have the ugly cry, your
Hmm.
bedroom, wherever you feel comfortable, because that's part of
Oh yeah.
grief.
It is. It totally is. And it was funny because as I'm ugly crying, I was thinking about what was going on at my workplace, and I started like laughing because my grandmother always would tell me, work hard, know how you got it, and don't kiss anyone's ass for anything. So I just could hear her voice in the back of my head saying those things. And I just started laughing so hard. And of course, in hindsight, if anyone was watching me, they were probably like, okay. But it was good. It was okay. Yeah. So it's funny though that both of us could hear, them and communicate with them, you know, in our thought processes. It just, yeah. But there were plenty of days. I don't know about you, but especially early on where I would go to lunch and I'd be crying into my Taco Bell in the car. So, um, yeah.
Yes, early on, lots of tears, lots of unprovoked tears that just. And I think I shared this story here before. I can't remember. I was in a work training after my dad died. I think probably a week or two after. CPR training. My dad died in a motorcycle accident. And so the teacher uses an example of you come up on a motorcycle accident and you have to deliver CPR.
Oh my God. Did
My
they
face
know?
turned no. I could feel it. You know, when your face starts to
Mhm.
turn red and the tears. I made it out of the training, got to the hallway, and just ugly cried. I'm hyperventilating. I'm trying to tell my boss what is happening. My
Mhm.
poor boss said, at that moment, she thought my mom had died or somebody else had died. She was like, I was
Mhm.
terrified by how hard you were crying,
Yeah.
that you had come to find me to tell me that somebody else had died, and I
Mhm.
wasn't ready for that. So just people, when you're grieving, know that the tears are going to come. Sometimes
Mhm.
you can make space for them, and other times, kind of like Beetlejuice, they are just going to come, they're going to
Yeah.
floor us, and it's okay.
Mhm.
Our society tries to push that away. I I worked with developmentally disabled people. It was lunchtime.
Mhm.
My boss was in lunch, and I am standing in the middle of the lunchroom just, and I'm still here.
Yep, you made it.
Yep, I
You're
made it.
still here. Well, and sometimes we also get what I call the snippy snappies, like Beetlejuice was so known for, those quick-witted replies that come out of nowhere but are perfect for the environment. And I remember it was like a while after she had died, and I went to a family get together, the family of my partner, and I felt looking back, I feel bad for the person that's made the comment because that was not their intention. However, they were just like, oh, hey, how are you doing? How is your grandma? Because everyone knew how close we were. And literally, you heard everyone's fork hit their plate, and the room went silent. And I just looked this person in the face and I said, well, she's a lot better than I'm doing right now. And everybody just started laughing. And of course, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say that. And, they were just so used to every time they see me, they would ask
Mm-hmm.
how she was, and, I mean, at least now everyone laughs about it, and what a great comeback that was. But, it was, either melt into the floor or just say something and then go on to the next thing. So,
Oh, thank you for that example. I love that example and how gracious you were in it. So, my example is going to normalize when you don't have the graciousness, like
mhm,
Anna just demonstrated when my mom was dying. This person definitely trying to come with me with care. They were genuinely
mhm,
curious. Anna and I are talking about very raw moments. She pulled me aside. How's your mom doing? And I said, she's dying.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the whole room's quiet. And I was so raw. I had nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
so Anna's, everybody laughed, which is beautiful. Mine, it was just kind of like that. I think of us, and I've shared this before, like porcupines. Like in
Yeah.
Anna's moment, they were able to pet her porcupine. In my
Mm-hmm.
moment, my quills went up and I shot them because I needed to protect myself. So remember, when you're grieving, again, I think of us as porcupines. So sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we're petable, and other times, watch out, because grievers, we're going to get you with a quill because we're just saying, I'm
Yeah.
not okay. You need to get some distance from me. Not that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not cute and cuddly and soft and petable right now. No, I've got some quills that can hurt.
Right. Yeah. And it happens. I mean, I think we're faced with all sorts of different personality types too during the grief and loss experience, and thank goodness for the supportive people, um those that are in my life, whether you've been around for a long time or you're kind of new to the show. Thank you. You know who you are, and I
Yes.
like love you all very dearly. And it helps cope, I think, with some of the other personality archetypes. And just to kind of describe a few of those, if you're grieving, you're going to run into these characters, and how you choose to react is your own process, your own journey. But there will be the all about me's, the I know exactly how he feels, the aren't you over it yet, or as I say, emotionally unavailable. What else? What else type of archetypes do we typically run into?
That is a great question. I think you've hit like the main three. I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to think because the aren't you over it, they tend to also be,
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe they're close friends with the
The
it never happened.
Yeah. Oh
So if
yeah,
you're
act
like,
like
I'm
it
really
never
sad
happened.
that this
Mm-hmm.
happened. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, did you watch the latest episode of blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah? And then you're like, oh, okay, so it
Mm-hmm.
never happened. And these, remember, how people come at us is a reflection of where they are. So if somebody
Yeah.
can't talk to you about
Mm-hmm.
your grief, that's because they are not dealing
Yeah.
with their grief. Because oftentimes when we're raw, we internalize, what was
Mm-hmm.
it that I said? You
Yeah.
didn't say anything. They were just setting a
They were just
boundary, and they didn't know
doing
how to set
them.
that
Yeah.
boundary. They're like,
Exactly.
I don't do grief.
Yeah. And speaking of
So
like the boundaries, like even I hope others perceive me this way. I try to be supportive and kind to those in my life. But I always foreshadow by saying I'm a helicopter person. If my consistent asking if you're okay and checking on you gets old, tell me. And that's okay. Like, if you know you're one of these personality types or you're this type of archetype, you can say, like, Margaret, from the bottom of my heart, let me know what I can do to help you. I'm going to continue to check in on you and text you and call you randomly and probably send you funny little notes. But if it gets to be too much, you tell me where to tone it down and what else I should be doing. And that's fine. Like, that is absolutely okay.
yes, definitely. You get to own how you show up, which
Mhm.
thank you, Anna, for sharing. And then also your friends and loved ones get to own how they show up. As you were speaking, I think of this friend who I have that I love, and she is so good. If I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you doing? I'm not talking with you about that today, Margaret. Okay.
Mhm.
And then we just go talk about something else, and it's just beautiful. So remember, it's not you, that person saying, I can't go where you want to
Mhm.
go. I can go here.
Yeah.
And we get to go there. And when we're grieving, knowing that we might say, I really need to go here. And somebody say, I can't. And you can say, okay, well, if you
Yep.
need to go that way, you go that way. I'm grieving. I'm here. This is where I am. So you can go that way.
Mhm.
And maybe I'll catch up with you.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. So I do have to ask you, of course, the
Of
question of the
course.
hour.
Yes.
Which character do you most relate to in Coco, and why?
I was going to do Coco and Beetlejuice, and it'll come right back at you. I guess
Okay.
Coco. I'm gonna have to go with Dante the dog. Because he is just, he's well meaning and
Hmm.
he's also a bit kind of chaotic and just doing his dog thing. And I
Yeah.
do know a dog that is very Dante. So
Hmm.
shout out to Miss Miko if you're listening with your puppy mom. She definitely is the embodiment of Dante, but I'm going to be there with her. Beetlejuice. I'm actually going to pick a main character this time. Anna's picked a couple main people.
Hmm.
We normally tend to be on the periphery. I'm gonna have to go with Lydia. She's a deep filler, but she's
Yeah.
got that wall up. I feel like you know me, you're like, oh, Margaret's hard to get to know, but once you get to know me, oh my gosh, I am so gooey inside. So, how about you?
Well, I think for Coco, probably Miguel because of just the natural intellectual curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah, I think that just the younger part of like young Anna definitely was very similar in that way. And I mean, everyone is just so endearing, but if I had to pick, I'd probably say Miguel. And I think for Beetlejuice, that's a tough one. Initially, I was going to say the sandworms. But, um, I I'm thinking Adam actually,
Hmm.
which is kind of strange for me. Once again, the main character thing. Um, but in the end, where he has the gumption and the smarts to drive the toy truck off and hit Beetlejuice in the foot, I enjoy finding clever, unusual ways to navigate through situations and help others do the same. So I'm gonna have to say Adam this time.
Ooh, yes. So fun. Everybody, thank you for listening. Go. I don't know. Anna's so much better at these clever little intros and exits than
Oh,
I am. So,
well,
Anna, take us out.
definitely. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope that you found this entertaining and got some great ideas for ways to talk about grief and loss and change and death. Your bellies are probably full of cocoa and Beetlejuice by now, so maybe grab some Ecto Cooler in the meantime, and we'll see you for the next adventure.
See you next time.
Unpleasant fun and lots of beautiful thoughts to you. Sorry for this sort of singing. Till next
No,
time.
that's
Bye.
great. Sing away. Thank you, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.